Hello, my beautiful blossoms, blooms, and buds. Welcome to the stream. Well, welcome to my book garden, which is actually my basement. But we're having fun anyway, so who cares? You might notice a few differences today. I decided since it was the last official part of the ending of Little Mushroom, we still have the extras at the end of the book. But since we're finishing the story part, I thought, why not do this? Hi, Chi Kiki. Welcome to the stream. This is my Anji cosplay. I've got the hype crawling. And I've got, of course, my spore and the bullet necklace. Thank you. I had a wig and it was a new wig and I tried it on and I was like, nope, can't see. Not today. Thank you though. But yeah. Oh yes. While we're waiting. So the legalities. I do not own Little Mushroom. I don't own anything connected to it other than literally the book in front of me and my time. I'm not getting anything from this other than the satisfaction of doing it. So please don't come at me for anything. I'm just putting this out there to put it out there. What else? This is Danmei, which means BL. We haven't really seen a lot of it. We've seen some very light BL moments. But that could always change. So, just a heads up there. If you need a heads up there, trying to think if I'm forgetting anything. Oh, yes. This is a very chill stream. If you didn't already know that, so that means I will be commenting, making asides, answering comments, laughing, gasping, and reacting. So if that's really not your thing, maybe this isn't your thing either. But I'd love to have you here, and I'm happy you are here. So I hope you have a wonderful time. Usually I try to summarize at the very least what was happening just before this. And that actually was a breakthrough at the mutation base. I forget what it's called. But it's their base. They were trying to find a pattern in the electronic fluctuations, the waves. And they had just had one where the magnetic poles were fluctuating, the aurora was fluctuating, and Tonglan was freaking out. Hello, whoever just entered. I see there's another person in here. Welcome. And so the monsters in the abyss are starting to go crazy or reacting to this wave. And we keep hearing the tremendous sound of flapping wings come from the jungle as though thousands of birds had taken flight. They'd been lurking in the abyss for a long time, each other, and refusing to budge. But now that the magnetic field was finally on the verge of collapse, these horrific monsters had suddenly begun to stir. And the last line, where we finished last week, was prepare to defend. So that was the base where Anji is right now. And we start at chapter 46. Colonel Liu is confirmed dead. Oh boy. What are you thinking about? Dr. G walked up behind Lu Feng. Lu Feng stood in front of the laboratory window, and before him were the brightly lit Garden of Eden and Twin Towers. It was only after he got closer that he discovered the colonel was not aimlessly unfocused. He was playing with a communicator, and the still-lit screen was on the contacts list. Dr. G glimpsed an unfamiliar name. Hubbard. Who is this? Dr. G stood next to him, eyebrows raised. You have a friend I didn't know about? Lu Fang did not answer. Dr. G did not pursue it any further. In front of this colonel, it was normal for questions to not be answered. As he said that, the little snow-white spore emerged from Lu Fang's shirt collar, seeming to carefully examine the doctor, and then swiftly dove back in to hide. "It's so small," Dr. G said with a smile. Lu Fang pulled it out and then put it in the palm of his hand. The spore, which had originally grown to be as big as a human's palm, was now only the size of a jujube pit. It desperately tried to hide itself in Lu Fang's hand, seemingly terrified of Dr. G. "I won't chop you up today," Dr. G said. "Become too small. Be good and eat more of the nutrient solution, and once you get a bit bigger, I'll chop you up again." Lu Fang shot a cold look at Dr. G. Crossing his arms, Dr. G drawled, "It's not like you're the one getting chopped up. Why are you being so pissy for?" Over the recent days, the base had realized that there was no way of explaining the reason for the spore's inertia using existing biotechnology. They settled for the fallback option, or in other words, they could only go all in and have all the researchers focus on a different direction. Today, they had finally come up with a way to manufacture hype extract. After the extract was diluted, the base planned to sprinkle it on the surfaces of important equipment. They were going to use this method, hoping that the inert spore would produce inert extract, and that the inert extract would create a protective layer, or that it would simply infect the equipment with its inertia, either of which would make it so that there would be no more worries of the equipment getting infected. After all, ever since the distortion began, even glass and wood could infect each other. Since that was the case, the extract was also capable of infecting other substances. They had even promptly sent 20 liters of the dilution to the underground city base by plane. In this regard, the higher-ups of the lighthouse had remarked self-mockingly that science had failed and that they'd begun planning to use incomprehensible witchcraft. However, they had no other option because all sciences seemed to have failed and nobody knew what they should place their hopes in. Dr. G reached out. "Let me play with it for a bit." Naturally, he didn't obtain anything. Lu Fang didn't even spare him a glance. But Dr. G still stared at the hint of the spore's white hype that were still showing. "Tomorrow we can manufacture another liter of extract. That's quite a lot now. The base demanded that we first ensure that the artificial magnetic pole's key aperture is protected." Lu Fang curled up his fingers, and not even a hint of the spore's hype showed anymore. "Don't be like this," Dr. G said. "Although the relationship between you two is very good, it doesn't mean you need to go so far as to protect it like it were your own son." How about that, huh? "Colonel Liu, have you noticed that ever since you came back from the wilderness, you've become less devoid of emotion?" Lu Fang still said not a word, so there was only Dr. G's endless chatter within the room. He would always become more talkative when he was nervous. For the past month, the amount he had spoken shot straight up. 3 minutes later, Lu Fang asked, "When will you start using the extract?" "The lighthouse is still discussing it because we have no way of ruling out the possibility that all matter will begin to fuse together after the distortion begins. At that point, the most likely result will be that it has no effect, and the best result will be that it confers its inertia to us. The worst case scenario, it'll turn all of our equipment into completely useless mushrooms. But they'd be cute." Lu Fang finally spoke, his cold voice sounding like it was frosted over. "If that possibility exists, why use it regardless? Those of you at the trial court like to strangle all negative possibilities, but the situation is different now. You know that no matter what we do, the situation will not be worse than it is now. After one more meeting, the lighthouse will be able to decide whether to use it or not." "Exactly what is inertia?" Lu Fang asked. "No infectivity." The spore emerged from Lu Fang's hand, then climbed along the uniform fabric to just below the epaulette that was on the side farthest away from the doctor. Lu Feng turned slightly, and the subtle movement revealed the visage of something on the windowsill. It was a small bottle of liquid with a label pasted on it, and on the label was a handwritten mixture 3. Well, I. Next to the bottle was an empty syringe. Dr. G's gaze turned apprehensive. That's the extract of a hybrid class xenogenic. What are you planning to do with it, he asked. Don't mess around with the stuff in the laboratory. It's dangerous. As Lu Feng looked at him, he said something that really had no discernible connection to their current conversation topic. When we were at the underground city base, there was no magnetic field and contactless infections and distortions were occurring. For a moment, the doctor didn't follow his train of thought, so he only nodded. Many of the soldiers who entered the underground city together with me to provide assistance were infected, but I wasn't, Lu Feng said. Seeming to have understood what he wished to say, the doctor didn't speak and just quietly looked at him. If the spore exhibits inertia, then Anji would also exhibit inertia, Lu Feng said. Dr. G nodded. But he could change between mushroom and human form. Furthermore, when he was in human shape, his genetics examination was devoid of abnormalities, he said flatly. Therefore, if I've already been infected by him and acquired inertia, there's no way for you to tell. Yes, I acknowledge that. We thought of that from the beginning as well, Dr. G said. But what's the point? It's precisely because we're unable to detect this type of infection that we made the decision to spray the extract over a wide range. Only when the waters ebb will the rocks show themselves. We won't be able to know whether the extract can protect humankind until the day that complete distortion arrives. But there's also the risk of everything turning into fungi, Lu Feng said. So what? The doctor looked at him. As though he had some sort of ominous premonition, his tone of voice became more aggressive. Infect me with monster extract. If I'm still human after a half-hour buffet period, it'll prove that Anji has already passed his inertia to me, and there will be no adverse reaction. The extract will be usable. The doctor looked at him without the slightest trace of surprise in his expression, as though he had guessed long before that he would say such a thing. As he looked at Lu Feng, his gaze gradually turned cold and weighty. With a shake of his head, he asked, Why is it you? The amount of time I spent with him was very long, and I had stayed with him in the period of indiscriminate infection after the incident with the underground city base as well, Lu Feng said, his voice flat. If he was capable of infecting others, then the most likely to have been infected is me. It's me. Dr. G let out a grim laugh and looked straight at Lu Feng as he approached the other man and raised his voice. After the incident with the underground city, you only accompanied him for a little while before leaving. The one who was with him the entire time was me. We slept in the same room. He was as well behaved as a kitten. We were as close as a man and his shadow, and we've had a lot of intimate contact that you wouldn't want to know about. If you could be infected, then why couldn't I? You still have much to do. Lu Feng was not at all provoked by his words, he said. You can't take the risk. You clearly knew this was a risk, didn't you? Exasperated, the doctor took a few breaths. In a loud voice, he asked Lu Feng, I can't take the risk, which means you can? Is self-sacrifice something so commemoration worthy to you? Lu Feng said nothing. Dr. G snatched the bottle, which had already been opened, from the windowsill. Then he savagely jammed the needle point inside and pulled the plunger, swiftly filling the syringe barrel. If you insist on performing this experiment, then I'm the only one who can do it. He gripped the syringe, his azure eyes frozen over and his rate of speaking extremely swift. You've done too many things already, so you better fucking live for me. Lu Feng didn't hinder any of his movements. He merely looked on in silence, his cold green eyes like lakes that could not be disturbed. He lifted his own sleeve. On the veins at his wrist, a pinprick of blood indicated that he had already been injected with something. If in half an hour, if I'm fine, you guys can use the extract. The doctor stood in place, chest heaving, and stared at Lu Feng. You. The rims of his eyes reddened with fury, and his voice was as hoarse and sharp as glass being ground. You hopeless, self-harming dumbass. The loss of a single scientist will have no effect on the base, but the loss of an arbiter? Have you not thought about it? Lu Feng gave no definite answer. Just then, the harsh noise of a communicator sounded. The doctor's breathing had not yet evened out when he accepted the communication. After listening for 3 short seconds, his complexion changed. I'll head over right now, he said to the other party. After hanging up, the look on his face was solemn. Minor distortions have been observed again, and the base has raised the intensity of the magnetic field to its maximum. The moment when our line of defense collapses is upon us. I'm going to go hold an emergency meeting, and it'll take half an hour or so. You stay here and don't go anywhere unless everyone starts evacuating. With those words, he hurried over to the door. Wait, Lu Feng called out. Dr. G's footsteps stopped, but in his lingering irritation, he did not turn back. Behind him, Lu Feng asked, Will Anji be unaffected by the distortion just like his spore? Even if all of humankind dies, he will live. Thank you. The doctor left, slamming the door shut behind him. Still standing in place, Lu Feng turned to look out the window. Beneath the aurora, the dark gray city was an unbroken expanse of jungle. The aurora fluctuated, casting its mysterious gray-green light upon the buildings. An animal's sharp howl rang out over in the city. That direction was the city's interior, the military base. The howl that sliced across the sky was only the beginning. A moment later, more bestial roars burst out from that place. The military base's emergency light suddenly lit up, but it swiftly went out again. At the same time, there came the sounds of sharp whistles and explosions, followed by a high-pitched evacuation alarm that enveloped the entire base. But Lu Feng's gaze lingered there only briefly. Then he looked at the immense wilderness outside the base. With a fluttering sound, a massive bat-shaped winged monster took flight from the distant mountains, followed by rising shadows of thousands of its kindred that blotted out the sky. The communicator lit up. Lu Feng tapped out the laboratory's number on the communication interface. A few seconds later, a message from Hubbard popped up. Understood. I'll be there in half an hour. The total collapse of the magnetic field occurred right in this half hour. On the open country around the base, monsters suddenly appeared from the skies and earth. It seemed that they had been in hibernation for a long time. Now the moment they had been waiting for arrived. Like a tide, they surged towards the base. The emergency lights in the corridors flashed wildly. Emerging from the conference room, the doctor hurried in the direction of the laboratory, followed by 2 servicemen. Doctor, please evacuate with us as soon as possible. The military cannot protect the entire base. Present, the monster are advancing. Oh, there's another typo. At present, the unmanned drones have already observed that the tide of monsters is advancing towards us. Ultimately, we can only take the artificial magnetic pole as our sole defensive position. I need to bring something with me, Dr. G said quickly. Give me 5 minutes. Colonel Liu is also in the laboratory. Please evacuate with us immediately. The serviceman with the United Front Center's logo on his chest started speaking more forcefully. It's special orders. For all personnel to take refuge at the Magnetic Field Center, Colonel Liu's presence would further aggravate crowd's confusion and trigger unnecessary conflict. Therefore, we can consider... Shut up! Emergency alarm sounded at a higher pitch, and the ear-piercing beeps and the red light combined. This was the highest level of wartime alarm, reminding people to promptly withdraw towards somewhere safe. The corridor was filled with Tumult. The howls of the monsters in the distant wilderness were clearly audible, and the experimentation staff in their white coats and the soldiers were in great confusion. The laboratory door was near, but there was suddenly a disbelieving look in Dr. G's eyes. The laboratory door was wide open. Before he had left, he had forgotten to lock the door amidst his heightened emotions. He strode in and saw a soldier with a black stripe of fabric wrapped around his right arm, carrying a sniper rifle, his aim trained on a figure sitting in front of the windowsill. His pupils contracted. Black fabric on the right arm was the symbol of the anti-trial movement. The communicator lit up, but he was in no position to pay it any mind. He shouted, "Lu Feng!" His voice was accompanied by the crack of a gunshot. The figure by the window swayed, then fell to the ground with a dull thud. Dr. G's eyes widened incredulously and his lips trembled. No. Don't move! The armed soldier was soon brought under control by the two servicemen who had come with him. Dr. G strolled in. Unable to care about anything, he knocked over some lab equipment on his way over. Fragments of broken test tubes scattered all over the floor. He went around a reaction cabinet and knelt in front of Lu Feng's fallen body while trembling. Lu Feng? Lu Feng! The eyes had not closed, and the limbs remained unmoving. The doctor reached towards the blackened muzzle of the gun. His communicator flashed once more. With one look at the sender, the doctor's gaze cooled, though he'd been trembling all over merely moments ago. Sorry, I am having issues with this page. One of the servicemen handcuffed the shooter, then walked towards the door. There's no need to come here. The doctor's voice rang out coldly in the laboratory. Colonel Liu is confirmed dead. The sound of military boots stepping on the ground paused. We regret to hear that. The ashen-faced Dr. G gave a tiny smile. I'm not very surprised, he said, with regard to how the arbiter died. EL-1109 cabin. Hubbard leaned against the cabin wall. He and Lu Feng could not be considered very good friends, but it seemed their relationship also counted as one where they'd risk their lives for the other. It took no small amount of effort to get that thing from your neighbor's place. I'm surprised you still kept it, though. I knew it. They placed the dummy. It wasn't Lu Feng. It was the pleasure doll. It took no small amount of effort to get that thing from your neighbor's place. I'm surprised you still kept it, though. It was well made, Lu Feng said. According to Shaw Scott's testimony, you provided the specific data. Hubbard smiled and did not continue this conversation topic. How did it feel to be confined, he asked. It was all right, Lu Feng said. With those words, he glanced at the others in the cabin. A nearby officer said, We all came back from the underground city base together, Colonel Liu. We guarantee that we won't report you to the military. There's no need to thank him. Hubbard wiped the gun in his hands. Well, it's only a siege of monsters. We're about to partake in combat again, and your plentiful experience against the enemy in the underground city was obvious to everyone. We don't mind working with you again, as it's quite a bargain for both parties. The officer said, assuming that the colonel is still willing to serve the base. Lu Feng's lips curved up slightly. Start checking the equipment, he said. To one side, Hubbard was cleaning his weapon, a semi-automatic gun that was entirely silver in color. His fingers rested on the gun stock, where there was a scuff patch with Tong faintly etched into it. He's so sweet. Like, I imagine he's this mountain of a man, and he just really likes Tong Lan. I hope he figures out that he's still alive, even though I think Tong Lan is turning into whatever these crazy monsters are going through. His gaze lingered on the string of letters. The nearby officer asked, Who is this? A friend, Hubbard said. I've known him for 33 years. That's so long. Hubbard gazed at the words for a long time before smiling. It's a bit of a pity. How come? We were born together, but in the end, we weren't able to die together. How could there be something so good? Indeed. Lu Feng observed their conversation with arms crossed. With his eyes half closed, no emotion could be discerned, and the others naturally didn't expect the arbiter to be able to empathize with their feelings. Not until Hubbard noticed something. What happened to your gun? He asked. Lu Feng said, I gave it away. Hubbard smiled. He seemed to have understood everything. When compared against the military's standard supplies, the mercenary captain was obviously filthy rich. He took out a black pistol and handed it to Lu Feng, and the moment it was handed over, he murmured, It'll be okay. Thank you. All right. I'm going to take a quick sip. Kind of amazed this is staying on as well as it is. Chapter 47, When You Walk Gentle into That Good Night. With engines roaring, the PL-1109 gradually took flight. It was accompanied by the entire fighter fleet. Together they made up the base's aerial combat force. Upon the vast flatland, waves of monsters surged towards the base. Through the porthole, Lu Feng looked northwest of the base. Amidst monsters howling, the closest ones came not from outside, but within the base, where the military base was located. Earlier, they had demanded the abolition of the trial court's absolute power over life and death, along with the transfer of suspected mutants to the military base for supervision. For the sake of demonstrating the correctness and nobility of the move, Colin, the organizer of the anti-trial movement, and the other core members volunteered to become their observers and guards. So when the distortion arrived, that became the first monster outbreak site. It was too far to see clearly, but one could imagine the scene of carnage. But no one was in any position to care. Xenogenics that humans mutated into were nothing more than the weakest type of monster. A slimy and grotesque octopus as tall as the Twin Towers wrapped around the building of the Twin Towers with its tentacles. The lights inside the tower blinked wildly, and its tentacles pierced through the glass. As it devoured humans with its razor-sharp teeth, screams filled the air. It could be heard even in the air. With a tremendous noise, the glass corridor bridge connecting the Twin Towers collapsed, and several black human shapes fell with the debris. They were caught in the monster's gaping, toothy maw, and the sounds of the buildings toppling covered the sounds of bones and flesh being chewed. Did they seriously just knock over one of the Twin Towers? Really? Okay. Do we bomb it? Yes. No longer in any position to care about what kinds of serious consequences it would cause, all they could do was drop bombs. If the monster was allowed to continue attacking, humankind's final refuge would also turn into ruins. Large uranium shells were dropped, and in the mushroom clouds, the monster body broke into countless segments that slammed into the ground. The two lofty towers gradually tilted, crashing into one another, and collapsed. They got both the towers. Well, dust filled the air. The frenzied assault and resistance lasted for an hour. Then they could no longer continue bombing. Apart from where the artificial magnetic pole was, the other parts of the base had either been occupied by monsters or razed to the ground. Perhaps they had been occupied first before getting razed to the ground. Only ruins remained in the thick fog of smoke. The monster's sole objective was living humans. Now they were all aiming for the entrance to the magnetic field center, which was humankind's final wartime encampment. In order to protect the magnetic pole, the defenses there were the highest standards, forming a virtual bastion of steel. Thus, these hordes of massive and ugly creatures that defied description securely surrounded the magnetic field center and rammed their way in. The airborne fleet could not drop even a single more shell because the light shells they had been equipped with were depleted. Now all they had left were a few heavy thermonuclear weapons. If they wanted to wipe out the huge monsters around the magnetic field center, the after effects of thermonuclear weapons would level the entire artificial magnetic pole. Even if they controlled the scope and didn't harm the magnetic pole, the tremendous destructive power of the thermonuclear weapons would also directly destroy the base's power supply system and thereby accelerate the deaths of the people in the magnetic field center. Now, all the ground combatants had sacrificed themselves. The situation inside the magnetic field center was unknown. Except for the 1,000 or so people who had been temporarily transferred to the magnetic field center, the base had no survivors. And the airborne fleet could do nothing about it. What was even more spine-chilling was that this was now the age of distortion, and distortion meant that the substances would change at a fundamental level. Perhaps in the following second the airplanes would crash, the magnetic pole would break down, or contactless infection would occur among thousands of people in the magnetic field center, leading to the magnetic poles being compromised from within. Compared to dying, personally witnessing the utter downfall of the city was even more cruel. The aircraft fleet quietly hovered up above, like ghosts drifting away after the death of the entire base. A communicator rang. This is a message from the Magnetic Field Center's Provisional Command Office. This is the Magnetic Field Center. The military is defending the entrance to the last. Half of our firepower has been consumed. Ruling out other unforeseen events, defense is expected to last 3 hours. Although we don't know why the base has become the target of a monster attack, the current situation is not something we can handle, nor is it something the airborne fleet can combat. Please cease the combat mission immediately, otherwise it will only burden the base's defense. Furthermore, we have detected that a large number of flying monsters are headed toward the base. For the sake of preserving humankind's vital forces, please leave the base immediately and find a safe place to land. Although we do not know how long you can survive for, please live on. Please immediately withdraw from the base. The aircraft fleet hovered for a long time. I repeat, this is an order. Please immediately withdraw from the base. The base gives you its blessing. Good luck. The communication ended. The channel was silent. In the cabin, all that could be heard were the sounds of suppressed and tense breathing. The officers fixedly observed the blighted land below, and it was difficult to say whether the expressions in their eyes were of hatred, despair, perhaps something akin to cinders. At last, another aircraft pilot's voice came from the fleet's communication channel. PJ-143 to PL-1109. Where are we withdrawing to? The PL-1109's officer looked at Lu Feng. Colonel Liu has an abundance of wilderness experience, he said. The implication was that Lu Feng would decide where to withdraw to. Lu Feng took the communicator. Highland 7, the military's 6-star refuge, has facilities to support life. Canyon 313 in the northwest region of the central basin is devoid of strong and deadly monsters, and there is water. If the fighter planes have enough fuel, we can consider the underground city base. He mentioned the 3 places in a flat tone of voice, then said, Please choose for yourself. PJ-179 requests to know PL-1109's destination. Lu Feng paused. His gaze swept over the people in the cabin, The Abyss, he said, to aid the Highland Research Institute. The place where the fusion faction is? An officer jerked his head up. That's the xenogenics territory. I'm aware of that, Lu Feng said. Similar questions sounded in the communication channel. Aiding the enemy? Won't the area self-governed by the xenogenics be even more dangerous? Requesting to know the reason behind this decision. It's my individual decision. The Highland Research Institute is the only existing human settlement outside the bases. Lu Feng said flatly. Please choose your destinations for yourself. The PL-1109's crew commander raised no objections. After a brief hesitation, he manipulated the flight controls, and the engines roared as the fighter plane slowly turned to the south. A voice came once more from the communication channel. Excuse me, you are? Trial court, Lu Feng. Silence. The PL-1109 climbed to a high altitude and flew through the boundless night in the direction of the abyss, its wing lights glowing. Above the base, within the hovering fleet, a fighter plane followed the PL-1109 southward. And a second one, then a third one. In the canopy of night, the wing lights and tail lights converged into a flowing river of light, till only two remained. PJ-254 and PJ-113 have decided to stand by and await orders. We will survive or perish with the base. May you prevail. PL-1109's crew commander replied, May we have a bright future. Take care and good luck. Hang on. The Abyss, Highland Research Institute. After the magnetic field failed, the image on the screen changed. All of the chaos had disappeared, leaving behind only a screen full of evenly distributed image noise. By no means could it be said to have a pattern or no pattern, because it was excessively chaotic. It instead exhibited a tidiness that was hard to describe. Just like that, Polly stared at his screen. He was clearly only looking at the screen, but Anji felt that he was looking through the screen at some massive and indescribable thing. Anji recalled what Tanglan had said to Polly an hour ago. That time, Tanglan had asked him if he had already realized something and just wasn't willing to tell them because the truth was something that they were unable to handle. Now, facing Polly's gaze, the same thought sprung up in his mind. Have you realized something? Anji asked. In the silence, Polly said, Perhaps not quite, but it's frequencies. Frequencies. Atoms, electrons, and protons. Matter is composed of elementary particles. But what are elementary particles formed from? Strings. Strings are lines of energy in two-dimensional space. It's only when they begin to vibrate at certain frequencies that they become particles in our space-time. The Simpson cage is a masterpiece in the field of particle physics. In the beginning, people used it to verify the correctness of string theory. Now it may indeed be correct. Anji murmured, I don't understand. That's all right. I'll give an example, Polly said. When you pick up a violin and pluck different strings, the strings will vibrate because they were plucked, and different vibrations emit different sounds. We call those units of energy that can be found throughout the universe strings. And the strings' various vibration frequencies produce different particles, forming our world. The reason why our world's laws of physics have previously been stable is because our strings have always been playing an unchanging piece of music. Therefore, electrons were electrons, atoms were atoms, and physics equations have always been those equations. But now... Anji's eyes widened slightly. Through this metaphor, he understood what Polly wished to say. The most terrifying thing is not that this theory is correct, but rather, it's now time to change to a different melody, Polly said. The strings of the universe are about to be played in a different way. Or perhaps the frequency of the universe was disordered in the first place, and humankind just happened to emerge during a brief period of stability. Once the age of stability ends, everything will return to chaos and disorder. The world's most fundamental components, those laws of physics, were a symphony played according to the sheet music. Now the old melody had taken its final bow, and a new prelude was about to begin. There had never been immutable laws, only eternal and chaotic terror. Anji looked blankly out the window. An ashen glow slowly lit up the sky. It seemed like only 3 or 4 hours of the night had passed, but dawn had begun to rise. All laws are falling apart, and matter is beginning to distort from its fundamental properties. You, me, the Earth, the Sun, and the Milky Way. The rotation is speeding up, Polly said. Anji asked, what will it be like in the end? I don't know. Polly shook his head slowly. Living and non-living things will mix together. All tangible things will change, and all of time and space will bend. Everything will take on another appearance that we're unable to understand. There's only one thing that's certain. Anji waited for him to finish. We will all die, he said. Anji began coughing violently once more. It seemed like he was going to cough up all the blood in his body, with the deterioration of his body being faster than the distortion of matter. He curled up in a chair near the fireplace with his arms wrapped around his knees. Surprisingly, he was still alive. It seemed like he was destined to witness the extinction of humankind at the final moments of his own life. Tanglan went out. The research institute consisted of half-human, half-monster xenogenics. Some of them had a high level of combat prowess, while others were just ordinary animals and plants that were even slower and clumsier than humans. Every arm of the massive vine that surrounded the entire research base lifted up, its branches and leaves standing on ends like the fine hairs on a human body, in a stance filled with aggression. Rustling shadows climbed up from the abyss like a rising tide of black water. The monsters that could only crawl were slightly slower, while the flying monsters had already circled their way up to the mountain top and dived down. Why had they gathered to attack the human base only after the wave had triumphed over the magnetic field? Was there something special about this timing? Or was it merely because human bodies were weak, making them easily preyed upon? That shouldn't have been the case. Polly muttered to himself, what do they wish to gain from attacking this place? From the nearby walkie-talkie came the whistling wind and Tanglan's voice. Half of the abyss's monsters are leaving the abyss, and the other half are coming here. The ones that have come up first are the flying monsters. We can't hold out, sir. What do we do? The Highland Research Institute had its own small reserve of armaments. A gunshot rang out, and a bird plummeted into the center of the Simpson cage. The glow of the Simpson cage was too bright, so Anji could clearly see what had occurred. That's right. Its wingtips had come into contact with crimson lasers and flames first, instantly turning into glittering powder. Its neck arched up. It seemed to want to scream, but its body swiftly fell under the effect of gravity into the sea of flames. Metal. Then its body completely disintegrated in an instant, and the glittering dust filled the Simpson cage like a springtime sandstorm with a crackling burst of sparks like that of firewood burning in a fireplace. Life disappeared just like that from its body to its soul. Anji curled in on himself and took a few arduous breaths. This may not be a clean way to die, but it was better than time itself that was killing him little by little. Polly helped him up and fed him a mouthful of glucose water, but the flow of the warm liquid into his esophagus was also like the cruel torture of being sliced open. He leaned against Polly. The Simpsons' cage is a strong force field and stream of high energy particles. It is too energetic. Angie nodded. Only after witnessing the bird's death did he understand why Polly strictly prohibited the people of the Research Institute from approaching the Simpson cage. Rum, who had been staring at the screen the entire time, chose that moment to speak up. Sir. Angie looked in his direction. On the screen, amidst the image, noise, and chaotic curves, several distinct white lines suddenly appeared. In a strange, yet orderly way, they intertwined and slowly rotated. At the same time, the sparks in the Simpson cage went out, and the last trace of the bird also disappeared completely. On the screen, the lines slowly disappeared. Polly Jones shot to his feet, his pupils sharply contracted, and his voice tremulous as he murmured, This is... Let me think. Polly threw himself at the console. As he hit the buttons at top speed, he babbled, Must lure all the monsters into the Simpson cage. He put his words into action. The people of the Research Institute had been provided with a dozen or so simple communicators to facilitate communication. The xenogenics, led by Tonglan, temporarily observed the outside world's monsters 100 meters away, and Polly commanded the ones with no fighting capabilities to transfer into the white building behind the Simpson cage. The monsters were aiming precisely at the people inside the Research Institute. After they did all that, the target of the monster's attack obviously shifted. Polly told Tonglan to create an opening, and a monster that had a star-shaped arrangement of tentacles yet could still fly dove straight down towards it. But the raging blaze of the Simpson cage blocked the entrance to the white building. If the monster wished to charge at the white building, it had to pass straight through it. Without any hesitation, it chose an angle that was minimally affected by the sea of flames and glided down. Several clear curves suddenly appeared on the screen again. They intertwined, appearing as distant as the long ripples in a swimming duck's wake. Polly stared at those curves. When the monster's body completely disappeared, the curves disappeared as well, once again changing into irregular snow-white visual noise. There has been other times when monsters or xenogenics were incinerated by the Simpson cage, but the curves back then were very distorted. It seemed that was also because of the magnetic field's influence, he said. Therefore, these curves represent the monster's innate frequency. If different monsters enter... Before he finished speaking, there was a dull sound. A person on the ground who had sniped the monster shot a smaller monster, and it also fell into the Simpson cage's boundaries. A similar burst of glittering dust scattered into the air, and several lines distinctly different from the previous creatures, but still clearly visible, appeared on the big screen. Polly's breathing quickened. In this world formed by elementary particles, every creature has its own frequency, and every substance, every element also has its own frequency, he said. They are independent of each other in stable waves. They infect each other in distorted waves. As he looked at the dancing curves and calculated parameters on the screen, the expression on his face could have been described as manic. The frequencies captured by the Simpson cage can be reproduced with the magnetic field generator. At the beginning, this was exactly how we simulated the geomagnetic field. If we transmit a captured monster's frequency, then the creatures within the artificial magnetic field will be infected by this frequency. He said blankly, At the very end, God has finally allowed me to glimpse a fraction of the truth. Should I thank him? It was like he had received some sort of divine instruction or had an illuminating epiphany. Are properties and even the classifications of species themselves also strings of numbers that can be expressed using parameters? Can we also use a few words to summarize them in either a high-dimensional or low-dimensional world? We have studied the geomagnetic field's frequencies, so we obtained the frequency that represents protection and resistance, which enables us to cling to life for over 100 years in this age. In fact, we have already come into contact with a portion of the truth ages ago. He wrote and drew on the paper again and again. Anji quietly looked at Polly from behind. Even though death was almost upon them, the truth was that important to humankind. But to him, it was meaningless. Humans use various complex theories to represent the world, but in his eyes, the world was the world. There weren't so many things to be analyzed or explained, only a complex manifestation. But Polly continued to talk. One frequency's wave covers another frequency's wave. There are strong waves and weak waves. There exist the strongest waves that can cover up everything, as well as the weak waves that have always been covered up. The wave inherent to humankind is weak, so it is easy for them to be infected by other creatures and lose consciousness. As he watched the hordes of oncoming monsters, an almost neurotic look showed in his gray-blue eyes. Anji knew that it meant that his scientist brain was spinning at a manic pace. He was handling and receiving too much information, so he could only sort out his thoughts by swiftly verbalizing them. Polly muttered, "What do they wish to obtain? The most powerful frequency? Or if they sense that the magnetic field generator can emit specific waves? Or, his eyes widened. In that case, could there be an absolute stable frequency?" He seized a piece of paper that was within reach. Gibran once told me that the northern base had found a sample that exhibited absolute inertia. He picked up the communication device. Anji quietly watched. He actually didn't understand much of what Polly said, but he understood some of it. Long ago, how did he come to have his own consciousness? He didn't remember. It must have been a coincidental mutation, a trifling ripple in the vast wave. So he came into being. So his destiny came into being. Then he met Anzi. The destiny of humankind was also like a shifting and uncertain piece of music. With a slight cough, he stood up from his chair. If he paid it no heed, the physical pain was actually a trivial thing. Polly heard him get up, and even though he was excited, he still said in a warm tone, "Don't get up. There's nothing here you need help with. Rest up." But right away, he became utterly absorbed in his research and discoveries again. After picking up a piece of paper, Anji wrote down a few words on it with a pen, folded it up, and handed it to Rum, then walked towards the door. Rum opened his mouth, but Anji gently gestured for him to keep silent. Standing on the other side of the door, Anji gently and sorrowfully looked at Polly through its translucent glass. With a click, he locked the door from the outside. The sound startled Polly, who had been immersed in his research, and he looked up in the direction of the sound. Anji turned and walked down the stairs, his footsteps slightly unsteady, and his internal organs feeling like they were being scorched by an inferno. Lastly, he threaded his way through the people on the first floor of the white building, descending the stairs in front of the building, and came to the Simpson Cage's brilliant inferno. He originally shouldn't have been here. He was a member of the Abyss, and it was the ones currently attacking the humans who were his kindred. But now the situation was reversed, for he stood together with the humans. They had acknowledged him and treated him well. The curling flames heated his face, and he bent double and coughed out a few more mouthfuls of blood. Xenogenic shouldn't have stood here in the first place. Have I felt happiness or suffering as a result of joining the human population, he wondered. The withering of a mushroom took time, for the dissolution of its hype was a gradual process. He had closed his eyes countless times, always feeling like they would not open again, but they still opened. What was it that had allowed him to stay until now? Chance? Polly had said that chance was destiny. Then let it be destiny that brought him here. The vine protecting the research base thudded to the ground. Bleeding from one wing, Tanlan rose unsteadily into the air and fought with an eagle that had dived down. Its sharp beak pierced his shoulder and blood gushed out. He didn't even groan as he pressed down on the bleeding wound with one hand and transformed his other hand into gleaming claws that he used to stab the eagle in the eye. Blood dripped onto the ground. Humans had happiness and suffering different from other creatures, yet did he regret it? Smiling, Anji took another step towards the Simpson cage. Tongues of flames licked his face, as hot as a scorching summer day. The sounds of something thumping against the glass came from the white building, but he didn't turn back to look. Along with the Simpson cage, the sunset at the edge of the sun... oh my goodness, we're going to do that sentence over. Along with the Simpson cage, the sunset at the edge of the sky burned as well. The huge sun sank, and its magnificent red-gold light illuminated half the sky. The fighting at the Research Institute continued, with howling, explosions, blood, the sun's rays, and the firelight mixing together. Uncle Shu, who had once cooked potato soup for him, was picked up and hurled back down by a monster. His body hit the ground hard, and his gaze froze while blood flowed from the rims of his eyes. On the blood-covered ground, death was everywhere. In his eyes, everything slowed down. Anji took another step forward. "Don't," Uncle Shu rasped. He let out a few heart-wrenching coughs. "Don't kill yourself." A creature's instinct was to live, and a species' instinct was to perpetuate itself. Humankind had never gone gentle into that good night. Facing the Simpson cage, Anji also felt the terror of impending death at last. He looked at Uncle Shu and softly asked him, though it seemed like he was asking himself, "But will you all still be able to keep living?" Uncle Shu's consciousness was already fading. He slowly shook his head and then looked towards the distant horizon. His gaze suddenly became fixed in place. After 2 seconds of silence, he suddenly broke out into a few wheezing laughs, and an excited expression showed on his face. A low droning that was different from the monster's howls came from the sky, and Anji suddenly looked up. Above the resplendent golden horizon, a neatly arranged group of distant black shadows were coming smoothly towards the Research Institute, leaving behind long and feathery trails as they flew through the clouds. "Airplanes," Anji heard Uncle Shu say. He knew those were airplanes. Looking up at the familiar shapes, Anji suddenly felt a wholehearted joy. They hadn't sent any distress signal to the northern base, but the northern base's fighter fleet had come to aid the Research Institute. In a conversation with Tang Lan not long ago, Polly had urged them to disregard old grievances and go help the base when the Research Institute no longer existed. But now, it was the base who had disregarded old grievances and come to help the Research Institute. Right at that time when everything was destined to end. Polly's words were correct. His species was both contemptible yet noble. You could make conjectures about humans' actions using the greatest ill intent, or you could believe to the maximum extent in human kindness and leniency. But the artificial magnetic pole had failed, so what would happen to the base? What would happen to Lu Feng? Or did the base no longer exist? Where would he be? He knew that Lu Feng would give up everything for the base until the day the base no longer needed him. A trickle of tears fell from Anji's eyes. In this vast judgment day, his love and hatred seemed all but worthless. Lu Feng had his own mission, and he himself had his own destiny. He took another step. Boom! A micronuclear bomb was released from the PL-1109's bomb bay. With a tremendous noise, it cut off the upward trajectory of the monsters below. Such a mountain peak was bound to become a target, but it was also bound to be easy to defend and difficult to attack. Open the cabin door, a cold and calm voice said. Prepare your hang gliders. There's a bit of an issue. Please wait a moment, the flight technician said. The fighter plane was nosediving, and the cabin door creaked as it opened mechanically. Lu Feng accepted the hang glider that a soldier handed over. You're going down? Hubbard asked. Mm-hmm, Lu Feng said. When aiding the underground city, it was for humankind's interest. Hubbard looked at him. What about now? Will the trial court come to help the xenogenics? Lu Feng only watched as this mercenary team captain also accepted a hang glider and started adjusting it. He asked flatly, And why are you here? I don't know, Hubbard murmured. I just felt that I would regret it if I didn't come. Click. Cabin door sprang open. Good heavens. Flight technician backed up. A fire? What is that? Fierce winds poured in from the outside, and Lu Feng looked down as he stood at the cabin exit. Suddenly, he was stunned. In front of the sea of flames, Anji lifted his head and looked at the visitors from the northern base. At that moment, it seemed as if time had come to a standstill. One looked at the other, and the other looked back. Anji began to tremble violently as he directly met Lu Feng's eyes. Their parting had been planned out long in advance, but their meeting was beyond all expectations. But he hadn't expected to see Lu Feng here, and he knew that Lu Feng hadn't expected to see him here either. The wind raised by the fighter plane clawed at the edges of his clothes. In a movement that seemed unconscious, he reached out. In that manner, those green eyes gazed at him. The Arbiter, whose mission was to exterminate xenogenics, had come to aid the fusion faction's base, and a monster was standing in the exact center of the Humans Research Institute. The whole thing was absurd, but the glorious morning sunlight came pouring down. They suddenly became brightly lit in each other's eyes. It's so cute. Indeed, Lu Feng was this sort of person. Anji's eyes curved as he smiled at Lu Feng. In his limited memory, he had never shown such an expression to Lu Feng before. They were separated by such long distance, but he saw those green eyes slowly become suffused with a smile as well, seemingly containing infinite tenderness. A gunshot rang out as Hubbard fired at a monster in the air. The fighter planes dropped uranium shells in the vicinity of the Research Institute in a fierce bombardment, and the sounds of combat, explosions, and howling combined into a grand noise that merged with the symphony from the universe's depths. But the monsters from the abyss continually surged forward. The sandstorms that followed the magnetic field's disappearance were almost here. The last human territory was failing. Humankind was on the verge of extinction. They locked eyes for a long time, seemingly erecting the deepest mutual hatred, yet also seemingly dispelling past grievances in an instant. On this day, they would once again be together, and once again freely. Anji slowly closed his eyes and leaned forward. Like a leaf fallen from its branch, withering in late autumn. In the raging blaze of the Simpson cage, at that moment when the morning sun was slowly rising and the setting sun of humankind was slowly sinking, his body turned into swirls of glistening dust that dispersed, fluttering in the air and ended. In the laboratory on the screen that was covered with visual noise, those trembling and erratic dots suddenly gathered together and spun. The analysis program started up, and 3 seconds later, several slowly entwining frequency curves appeared little by little on the screen, as though it were destiny. While looking at the parameters jumping on the screen, Polly Jones switched the communication channel to the emergency channel connected to the northern base and underground city base. Without knowing if they could hear him, he suppressed the tremor in his voice and spoke. This is the Highland Research Institute. Please adjust the emission frequencies of the artificial magnetic pole. Channel A1, 252.7. Channel A2, 9.13531. Channel D3, 407. Runji wave, level 6. Adams property, lattice 3. Configuration complete. Please activate. Repeat. Channels A1, 252.7. Channel A2, 9.13531. Channel D3. Behind him, Rum finished adjusting those parameters with near trembling fingers. Pressed the round button in the middle. The tops of the white towers at either of the Highland Research Institute shone with glaring light. Imperceptible silent waves radiated outward like ripples from between the two white towers. In the east and the west, the humans' two magnetic poles emitted grand waves. Like the first bell toll of the new year, everything fell silent. Well then. That happened. It's not done. We've got 1 chapter. 2 chapters. I just need a quick tea break. I'm wondering if he's going to come back through the spore. I kind of appreciate kind of the jumping back and forth and how chaotic that kind of is, where they're not just structuring it separately. It adds to kind of the chaos of what's going on. Okay. All right. Chapter 48. He was just a little mushroom. Lu Feng! Hubbard shouted. He saw Lu Feng's fingers press down on the edge of the cabin door till they turned a bloodless white. Slightly lowered eyelashes and blank expression seemed to strive to conceal their master's outburst, but the trembling fingers already revealed the entire truth. Amidst the all-encompassing sea of flames, his voice was hoarse, yet still calm and forceful, as he said, "Prepare to attack." Unexpectedly, the attack was by no means difficult. In that instant, the monster's attack seemed to have slowed greatly. It was as though they had stopped persistently and madly attacking people in search of something, and were just carrying out an ordinary hunt instead. Amidst this ordinary hunt, some monsters turned around and went in the direction of the abyss, while others continued attacking the Research Institute. Of the monsters that had already entered the Research Institute, more than half of them were killed by the Simpson cage. Then the Simpson cage ran out of power and gradually went out. But the Research Institute began its counterattack and effectively resisted the monsters' offensive. As for the monsters in the periphery, they were solidly blocked off outside the line of defense by the PL-1109's micro-nuclear bombs and heavy weapons. This was the wilderness, so apart from the tiny courtyard on this mountaintop, there was no need to hold back for fear of harming innocents. Just like the time when they flew above the vast flatlands of the underground city base, the fighter fleet was truly fulfilling its role here. The monsters inside were gradually wiped out. The heavy weapons had built up an insurmountable and smoky line of defense around the Research Institute. Monsters of the Abyss naturally had noteworthy intelligence. After doing a little thinking, the monsters in the back turned around, retreating in the face of unfavorable odds. Their arrival was as abruptly tempestuous as a tsunami, and their departure was like the tide slowly receding. Atop the sorrowful mountain peak, 2 hours later, all was still. Red, white, all sorts of liquids covered the open space in front of the institute. At noon, when the sunlight was at its most glaring, the bloodstains glistened. The PL-1109 slowly landed. The human military officers paid Polly Jones a visit at the White Building. Seemingly bearing no feelings of animosity resulting from the differences between humans and xenogenics, they eagerly asked what exactly had happened earlier. The Highland Research Institute likely treated them as the compatriots. After explaining the stable frequency, Polly Jones, as the Research Institute leader, thanked the Northern Base for its selfless aid. "How is the base?" he finished by asking. However, the response he got was silence. The suffocating silence, a voice suddenly came from the emergency communication channel. "This is the Northern Base," Dr. G's voice was tremulous. "Hello, requesting information on the situation." "This is the Highland Research Institute base. Hello," Polly said. "The Northern Base. The monsters are falling back." Amidst the crackle of statics, Dr. G's voice was hoarse. "People of the base have retreated to the Magnetic Field Center Core Laboratory. The number of survivors is 342, and 136 are seriously injured. Airstrikes are ineffective, and thermonuclear weapons cannot be used. Requesting light weapons and troops." He gasped heavily for breath, as though he was suppressing something. "The monsters are no longer madly attacking humans, but they still have not given up on taking surviving humans as their prey. We are still desperately holding the core laboratory's line of defense." Polly stared silently at the blank screen. "Are you hurt?" he finally asked. Amidst Dr. G's formulaic tone, his voice finally took on an additional tremor of emotion. "I'm hurt, Mr. Polly. We've never met, but—" He didn't finish his sentence. After a hurried gasp for breath, however, he changed the topic. "I have served the base for 20 years and pride myself on my outstanding intellect, but I have not helped the base achieve any breakthroughs whatsoever, Mr. Polly. In the past, I've heard the people of the Northern Base say that you presided over the research and development of the genetic examination instrument. Now they say that you've extracted a stable solution, which may be why the artificial magnetic pole still is yet to malfunction amidst today's storm of distortion. Thank you," Dr. G said. "We will defend the magnetic pole until the final moment. But please, also prepare for the magnetic field to disappear. Please take care of yourselves." We're getting there. What followed were only the sounds of distorted breathing. Amidst the intermittent static, background noise, commands, gunshots, screams, and the sounds of goods being toppled, walls collapsing faintly came through. It was silent within the Highland Research Institute. At last, someone asked, "Then will we still die?" The PL-1109 fleet had brought fire support, but it was limited, after all. Supposing the Northern Base had already run out of strength to hold off, and the magnetic field that enveloped the entire world still could not escape its destiny of vanishing, how many days would the Highland Research Institute be able to last? There had been endless sacrifices and a stable frequency, but there was still no hope for survival. Humankind's aspirations were still the full moon in the water. Nobody replied. In the deathly silence, the atmosphere was a lump of congealed, rotted flesh. Someone laughed softly, and it was like a knife sliding across the frozen, rotted flesh and opening up a mocking cut. But amidst this deathly stillness, the hissing static suddenly paused, and another unfamiliar voice came through. "Hello, The other party's pronunciation was choppy, so the syllables could only be distinguished with difficulty. My deepest apologies. Our instruments broke down, so we were unable to successfully send anything to the emergency communication channel until now. This is the underground city base's command center. The air was stagnant. This is the Highland Research Institute, Polly replied. How is the status of the underground city base? Everything is well at the underground city base, the other party said. After the collective monster attack 2 months ago, the base closed its ground entrance and adopted a full blockade mode. Today, the flatland was surrounded by a large number of monsters, but due to our geographical advantages, it was not invaded. Polly was slightly moved. But the other party continued, saying, the underground city base is thankful to the northern base for its selfless aid 2 months ago. We are especially thankful to Colonel Lu Fang, who made the decision to render assistance. After learning about the situation in the north, the supplies, weapons, and ammunition that the northern base has provided to us were all loaded onto transport planes. The transport plane formation took off from the underground city base 6 hours ago, accompanied by 1,000 lightly armed paratroopers, and is expected to arrive at the northern base in half an hour to render assistance. He said, Northern base, please persevere for 30 minutes. There was a noise that sounded like something sliding to the floor. Afterwards, the doctor's voice came through, low but very resolute. It will be done. Polly Jones' voice came through the communication channel. The stable frequency has covered the entire world, he said. Please do not worry about substances distorting. Roger. The underground city base's operator held back the excitement in his voice. Although we don't know what you did, thank God and thank you. Information kept coming. The northern base is continuing to defend, a young voice said. It seemed as though someone else had taken Dr. G's communicator. Then came information from the underground city base. The transport plane fleet has landed. To the northern base survivors, please indicate your location. Commence the breakout. In the end, they scooped up the full moon in the water. The sun rose bit by bit. Amidst the howling cold wind, the winter sunlight was glaring, devoid of any warmth. On the test tube racks, glass sparkled. In the still atmosphere, there seemed to be the sound of one heartbeat after another. Original residents, newcomers, xenogenics, military officers, they kept watch in front of the communication channel, waiting for information on the underground city base's assistance and the northern base's condition. Even the vine that had always been guarding the research institute extended a single tendril, through the window. They also occasionally whispered to each other. How many of ours have died? Uncle Shu died. His body is downstairs. What about Tong Lan? Haven't seen him. The breakout and counterattack had begun. Nobody reported on the situation through the communication channel, so everyone held their breaths as they waited. Amidst the silent tension, Polly Jones got up from in front of the computer. Because of his age or his emotions, his footsteps were somewhat faltering. With a creak, he pushed the door open, and what he looked at first was the extinguished Simpson cage. Blood and bodies were everywhere outside of it, but the interior of the Simpson cage was spotless. Then he turned his gaze forward. Outside the laboratory door, the black figure who had been leaning against the wall slowly lifted his head as well. Those eyes seemed utterly vacant, age-old layers of ice covering a green ocean. They only needed to meet to know who the other was. Polly Jones' gray-blue eyes were filled with grief. Child, he said gently. Lu Feng did not respond to him, but his gaze traveled downward to settle on the sheet of white paper that Polly Jones was holding in his hand. Polly's fingers trembled as he held the paper out. On the paper were several harshly scribbled lines. Anji's writing could not be described as beautiful. All of his strokes were plain and simple, so clear as to be reminiscent of a lake in springtime. Polly, thank you for looking after me. I am the Northern Base's inert sample. Perhaps my frequency will be of help to you, but if not, I'm sorry. P.S. Please be sure to remember our agreement. Was he really that inert sample? Polly Jones asked. The sample was a part of him. Lu Feng took the snow-white slip of paper. His voice was slightly hoarse as he said, "What was your agreement?" "If there came a day when the arbiter of the Northern Base arrives," Polly said, "I should say that Anji left of his own will." The rims of Lu Feng's eyes reddened slightly. From behind him came the sound of heavy footsteps, which belonged to a dark-skinned Indian man. Holding Anji's backpack in his hands, Rum silently held it out to Lu Feng. Inside it, a few items had been neatly packed. A copy of Base Monthly, a silver-pointed star badge, and a black pistol. Lu Feng gripped the edges of the backpack. He bowed his head and stared at the contents within, his expression difficult to make out. He was brought here from the abyss by our people. He was a good child, and he led a good life here, Polly murmured while looking at him. I know that the base could not accept him. Did you know this entire time he was here? Lu Feng's gaze finally shifted from the backpack to Polly Jones. I didn't know, he said. The expression on Polly Jones' face trembled violently, and he closed his eyes in anguish. I'm deeply sorry, he said. Their unexpected reunion was their final parting. It turned out that this sort of icy torture existed as well. The bitterly cold wind blew through the mountain peak. After a long silence, Lu Feng asked, Where is he? The Simpson cage is a high-energy force field in collider. Any matter that enters it will be bombarded and disintegrated into tiny pieces by high-energy particle flow, Polly said hoarsely. I believe you saw for yourself. The backpack thudded to the ground and the muzzle of the gun rested against Polly's temple. Lu Feng stared at Polly with an icy expression in his eyes. Where is he? He repeated the question, articulating one syllable at a time. All of his emotions exploded at that moment, and his icy eyes contained a faint madness. He was like a convict who, despite having already been sentenced to death, still wanted to repeatedly confirm his sentence. A sorrowful smile appeared on Polly's lips. He looked up at the limitless distant sky with his loving gaze. He was fully aware that what this man before him needed was only a white lie, even though they both understood everything. His frequency has been sent out to the entire world. He will deliver everything from the distortion, Polly Jones said. He's right by your side. There's no place where he isn't present. Lu Feng only looked at him in the same manner as before, and they remained in that stalemate until Lu Feng's fingers shakily loosened. The pistol clattered to the ground. With a bang, it struck the corridor's iron railing and triggered a drawn-out metallic hum. My apologies, Lu Feng said hoarsely. He closed his eyes, clenched his fists, and did not finish his sentence. There's no need to be like this. Polly looked at him with a tender gaze. You can shoot me or vent your feelings however you please, child. Thank you, Lu Feng said hoarsely. If he is still around, I will. That was the most calm yet despairing sentence Polly Jones had ever heard. In that manner, they stood side by side in the late winter corridor, all the way until the blood-like setting sun dyed the mountains and the abyss, and until the communication channel's volume was turned up inside the laboratory. Amidst the static, there came excited shouts. "They're falling back! They've fallen back! The tide of beasts is dispersing! The breakthrough succeeded!" From the channel, the cheers of victory rang out. The fragmented scraps of celebration were mixed with bits of information, such as how the underground city base's paratrooper unit sacrificed more than 600 people, how the northern base's actual number of survivors were 100 and so, or how people were eagerly asking why the distortion was no longer occurring, and what exactly had happened to the Highland Research Institute. Grief and joy overlapped little by little, despair and hope existing together. Everything was fortunate, and everything had its price. The sacrifice of countless people, the sacrifice of one person. A trickle of tears flowed slowly from the corners of Polly Jones' eyes. Suddenly, a mass of white floated down from Lu Feng's shoulder, drifting on the wind to land on Polly's clothes, and extended soft hype to touch him with. "What is this?" Polly asked as he held it. "The inert sample," Lu Feng said. "The thing most important to him." Polly Jones naturally knew who Lu Feng was referring to. Between the two of them, there was only one him. He stared at the hype, then reached out to touch it, and the hype gently wrapped around his finger. Polly asked softly, "Why did it approach me of its own accord?" Lu Feng said, "I don't know." "This is an asexual spore, a fungus's propagule." Polly Jones had a slightly stunned look in his eye. "Never told us what species he belonged to. So he was a—" While looking at the spore, Lu Feng murmured, "He was a mushroom." His voice was hoarse, but it seemed to contain endless compassion and tenderness. "He was just a little mushroom." Alright, it looks like we have one more chapter left. I need a quick tea break. Well, energy drink then tea. I honestly was not expecting Anji to die. And I'm kind of hoping there would be some science magic with the spore. Sorry if I'm kind of like raspy tonight. I don't know what's quite going on. Maybe I'm just choked up that we're ending it. Okay. Chapter 49. He is the one who judges me. 3 years had passed since the final battle. That day, the East Pole and the West Pole had emitted the absolute stable frequency. Since then, monsters no longer persisted in attacking the human bases. Substances no longer polluted each other, and humans found consistency in the distortion. Later, that frequency was called the bell toll. And the Highland Research Institute and Mr. Polly Jones, who had discovered the bell toll, were forever recorded within the milestones of human history. Highland Research Institute, White Building. Green vines climbed all over the windows and railings. The vine that had always been guarding the Research Institute died naturally a year ago, and its seeds had scattered all over the soil of the Research Institute, sprouted, and then grew this spring. The distant mountains were covered with a layer of snow-white mist, and within the mist was a wild profusion of flourishing greenery. Everything was normal and everything was calm, as though it was a day in the spring of 2020. In the corridor outside of the laboratory, there was a wheelchair. Polly Jones was sitting in it. The primeval wind traveled through the abyss, climbed up the mountaintop, and stirred his head of white hair. At his side stood Lu Feng. In 2020, I was 15 years old and majoring in physics at university, an elder voice sounded. Later, I often dreamed that I had returned to that year and was standing at the podium in the advisor's office, or in the middle of the sports grounds. I'd loudly tell them that the geomagnetic field was about to disappear and that we had to take precautions ahead of time. He paused, a hint of a resigned smile appearing at the corners of his lips. Sometimes they believed me, and sometimes they wouldn't, but when I opened my eyes each morning, what I saw was still this awful world. Fortunately, although this world is still so awful, or even worse than before, at least there's no need to count down the days until extinction. Polly Jones lowered his head. In his hand was a copy of Base Alliance Day with the date and time on the cover. April 2164. 134 years after the calamity occurred, humankind seemed to have finally been integrated into the violent world. Many people would mention the last war. The northern base had chosen to assist the Highland Research Institute. Otherwise, the Highland Research Institute couldn't possibly have persevered until the moment the stable frequency was found. The underground city base had chosen to aid the East Pole. Otherwise, the magnetic pole would have collapsed and fallen to the enemy. There would have been no way to emit the frequency. The two decisions were both made on account of humankind's inner kindness, and they narrowly achieved victory. And the ones who assisted the Highland Research Institute only had one fighter fleet, while the ones who had assisted the northern base had only 1,000 paratroopers. Humankind's final struggle as it moved towards its own demise was not a magnificent war, but a dull cry. Although humankind believed its existence, evolution, and demise to be of vital importance among the world's changes, they had proved their own weakness and insignificance again and again. Indeed, the human race had actually met its demise. After being infected by the absolute stable frequency, they had finally obtained a permanent and stable immunity. Sometimes there was even a chance of them being able to obtain a monster's genes, obtaining these powerful physical features and shapes, while still maintaining clear wills. This may have been the fusion faction's victory, although the theories and methods used were not the fusion faction's. After the peaceful fusion with monster genes, humankind's own strength had been enhanced, and they no longer depended so much on the limited quantities of weapons and equipment. They began using the monsters' methods to fight monsters, using plain methods to attack and defend. Some humans chose to leave the bases, either returning to the ruined cities or forming small settlements in the wilderness. All in all, the cities disintegrated. Around the world there remained fewer than 5,000 survivors. They could no longer form grand social structures or armies. Those kinds of things. Centered around the East Pole, West Pole, and Highland Research Institute, small settlements radiated outward in star-like shapes. The monsters of the external world who needed food still eyed them greedily, but they no longer coveted human genes, or, to put it another way, most of the monsters who survived up until now had already obtained human genes. Viewed from a different angle, under the all-encompassing frequency, both humans and monsters had achieved stability. It was an undefiable fact that humankind's intellectual superiority had come to an end long ago. The bell tolled, allowing humankind to survive, but proclaiming the end of the age of humans. It seemed as though they had started being an ordinary species, living arduously in the world. Some people say it's a fall, but I think it's an ascension. Polly stepped forward. Polly looked forward, not stepped. He's in a wheelchair. Oops. We are simply retreading the journey that humankind's ancestors once took with new accomplishments and knowledge. On the open space in front of the white building, young scientists clad in white coats traveled along, back and forth between instruments. Suddenly, there was a jubilant commotion, and a young man in the middle raised aloft a beaker full of water. This situation was crystal clear. By sampling and reproducing the frequencies of substances, They successfully infected other substances with the frequency of distilled water, turning the pitch-black, murky water in the beaker into a cup of clear, pure water. Many things were being redefined, and a new theoretical framework was beginning to emerge. Whether it was correct or not was a mystery, but it was indeed slowly progressing. I still don't understand exactly what these frequencies are. Do they represent a substance's fundamental composition, or are they just terms referring to a substance's properties? Polly Jones's voice had become harsh and hoarse due to his advanced age. Obtaining the frequencies of specific substances and then being able to alter the real world is even more of an expectation exceeding accomplishment. We are still insignificant, only obtaining a superficial projection of the real world via simple and crude methods. But even a mere projection is enough to temporarily shelter humankind itself. Facing the boundless wilderness, he murmured to himself, "In 100 years, 1,000 years, will we know more?" Lu Feng pushed his wheelchair over to the waterfall-like vines. On this spring day, when everything was coming back to life, tiny white flowers grew thickly all over the oddly shaped vines. The flowers came in a variety of shapes and hues, ranging from dark to light, but they all coexisted on a single vine. Am I being too optimistic? Polly smiled. Even the question of whether humankind still exists in 100 years is a difficult one to answer. Survival was as precarious as before, and dark clouds were still circling. There was still no effective solution to the issues of fertility and reproduction. The copy of Alliance Daily in Polly Jones' hand, which had already started going fuzzy at the edges from frequent perusal, was stopped on the third page, where two things were reported. The first report stated that a scientist who had happened to fuse with a bird had laid an egg while in bird form, but the chick that hatched suddenly changed into human form after it turned 1 year old. The second report stated that a fertile woman from the underground city base had declared that when her life came to an end, she would be willing to walk into the Simpson cage and donate her own frequency for research. "My life is coming to an end," he said, and closed the daily. "Some people have finally survived. Throughout all these years, I've constantly been asking myself if I had finished atoning for my sins," he said. "But I still cannot face everything I did back then. Can only wait for God to judge whether I am right or was wrong after I die." Lu Feng asked, "Was it for this reason that you left the base back then?" "Yes. I was unable to face my own heart after all, and unable to approve of the trial court's beliefs." He looked at Lu Feng. "I can't compare to you." "I haven't done anything," Lu Feng said. Polly shook his head. A mighty spring breeze blew over the mountain peak, and the delicate fragrance of the vine's flowers dissipated in the wind. "You all have faced everything I could not face back then, and you persevered the longest." He lifted his head and held Lu Feng's hand. "Humankind's interests take precedence over all else. Thank you for allowing the base and artificial magnetic pole to persevere until the end. This is the ultimate reason for humankind's victory." Lu Feng said, "Thank you. I heard that you've started compiling a base chronicles. In 100 years, how will people judge the trial court?" Polly looked towards the pale eastern sky, where the daybreak was rising, and his gaze contained a distant tranquility. "Some will criticize it, while others will eulogize it. The only sure thing is that everyone will remember it." He continued, "And even more will remember you, child." Lu Feng's gaze lingered on a patch of snow-white velvety petals. The sunlight turned it into a translucent golden crystal. "There's no need." His eyes closed slightly and his voice was flat, as though all of what Polly Jones just said had nothing to do with him. The sun's rays also illuminated the dark silver buttons and trimmings on his black uniform. His figure was straight-backed and his attire impeccable. His nigh-perfect facial features, uncommon eye color, and impassive expression left a haunting impression on all passerby. New vines wound around the corridor that was bathed in the morning light. He stood in a patch of surging spring scenery, yet he seemed completely out of place. In the courtyard and the corridors, many people would surreptitiously turn and examine him. The final generation of arbiters, he carried on his shoulders too many unsettled grudges and puzzling enigmas. Opinions in the northern base varied. Some said that he was assassinated, and others said he shot himself. Only the people of the Research Institute knew that the arbiter was staying here forever, although no one knew why. "Look at me, child," Polly murmured. Lu Feng looked at him. Although those gray-blue eyes had clouded over, they were still bright with excessively clear and penetrating wisdom, benevolence, and grief. It was like they could see through all the world's facades. "Sometimes I feel like you've been freed, and sometimes I feel like you haven't," Polly said. "These past 3 years, everything has been making a turn for the better. Are you still unable to face the past?" "No." The answer, however, was unexpected. Lu Feng looked straight at him, his voice calm and devoid of any hesitation. "I have not sinned." "There's not a single arbiter who would say such a thing. Humankind's interests take precedence over all other." Lu Feng turned slightly. In that infinite morning light, he was a backlit silhouette. "My belief has never wavered." "Yet you live in suffering." "I used to suffer for the trials," Lu Feng said. "Now losing him is my only suffering." Oh, my heart. That line hurts. That hurts. I'd never met such a warm and quiet child before. Polly closed his eyes, seemingly dwelling on the past. He came from the unknown into the world, as though it were for the sake of experiencing suffering. But humanity's suffering would not harm any of his innate qualities. "My days are numbered. I only wish to see him alive one more time." In the long silence, they looked at the laboratory behind them. In the place that was only a wall away, young assistants were busy recording data. They were even more busy than ever, as though today were some special day. Visible through the window was a transparent rectangular tank laid horizontally on the snow-white floor. It resembled a coffin of crystal. The coffin of crystal was filled with pale green nutrient solution, and within the nutrient solution, snow-white hypae grew without restraint, entwining with each other and forming a snow-white cocoon that was shaped vaguely like a human. Oh! It had grown very swiftly from a spore the size of a jujube pit into a long and soft aggregate of hypae. Just like that chick who had suddenly changed into a human infant, one day it exhibited a human form. On countless nights, Lu Feng had leaned down and looked at that familiar profile through layers of hypae. "Is it him?" he asked Polly Jones. He was an asexually reproducing mushroom with no distinction at all between his body and his spore. I could only tell you that there were no differences genetically and that the frequency has always been identical. In a biological sense, they are one and the same, Polly murmured with a small smile. In your ancient legends, there are stories of the phoenix being reborn amidst the raging flames. In fact, with regard to those creatures with simple compositions, it is indeed so. Death means rebirth. They have many ways of continuing their lives, unlike mammals. Will he remember? I don't know. Polly shook his head. It'll depend on him. Is that a new individual or a continuation of his old life? I'm afraid that we will only know after he wakes up. That is also part of my current research. Remember what I mentioned to you before? This may be a new and unique method of survival for organisms. Lu Feng turned his gaze to the distant sky, his expression unwaveringly cold and calm. I hope he forgets everything. Why? The human base and I have only brought him suffering, he said. I hope he'll never experience those things again. Polly shook his head. And how do you know what this world was like for him? Lu Feng's words landed softly. Therefore, I'll accept all outcomes. Polly said nothing. In the silence, the sound of instruments beeping, laboratory staff shouting, and objects falling to the ground suddenly came from the laboratory. The sounds traveled out intermittently, allowing the people outside to know what was happening inside. At the break of dawn, the morning light illuminated Polly Jones' elderly body. As though the final worries on his mind had been resolved at last, he felt a sense of relief and turned his wheelchair toward the laboratory, his gaze even warmer than before. But Lu Feng didn't turn around. He's woken up, Polly Jones said. Why won't you go see him? In the laboratory, there were some chaotic noises. After a very long time, Lu Feng spoke. You once asked me how exactly I viewed him. His voice seemed to come from a faraway place. I thought about it a lot. There was another long silence. Golden sunlight flooded the chain of mountains in the east, and a red sun sprang up from the horizon. In the wind, he closed his eyes. The sculptures of the ones waiting, the portraits of those who went on pilgrimages, even every one of them resembled him. Every person had once shown this expression on the night before judgment arrived. He said calmly, He is the one who judges me. Then came the sound of a door, and light footsteps stopped, not far away. On the mountain peak, within the morning sunlight, the mist and the gentle breeze, a clear, soft voice spoke. Lu Feng? The end. Whoo! What a way to end it. I mean, we still have the extras, but that is technically the end of Little Mushroom, and now it's just the epilogue. Yeah, that really was a good ending. I kind of was wondering with the Spore if he was going to come back, and I'm really glad he did. But I am so excited to see kind of some of the extras, because that's probably where we'll actually get like the relationship aspect. And about that, so I posted that survey about, hey, do we want to do 2 sessions or do we want to do one big chunk? And the majority said one big chunk. So we will be doing a mega session on Thursday. It is, let me calculate how many pages it is. So it starts at 305 and it ends at 398. So we are about to do 100 pages. So that'd be one of those buckle up, grab a energy drink and some tea and settle in, wear your comfy clothes because you'll be sitting for a while. But yeah, no, it's definitely going to be a good time. Oh, and I was looking, and I'll check the results again on my phone. But I believe that the majority of people have decided on Little Mushroom. No, on Golden Terrace as the book we will be reading after we finish everything here with Little Mushroom. So that, let me look at my calendar. Let me see. Okay. So the 27th we will be reading the epilogue and finishing that. Let me see when my convention is. So okay. Yeah, we can get a couple sessions in before the con. Yeah, that'll be fine. Okay. I've got a convention coming up next month, so I was making sure it wasn't going to be like the week right thereafter, because otherwise I wouldn't want to start the book and then just leave it hanging after the first bit. But I will keep all of you posted about that when it comes. So we will start Golden Terrace on the 1st, Tuesday the 1st. But we will finish the epilogue for Little Mushroom. Why? Nope. Okay, there it is. We will finish the epilogue for Little Mushroom on the 27th. Same time! Although, maybe I'll do. Are you able to come an hour earlier? Because I think I can make it. If we wanted to, just so it's not so late at night. I could start it at 7 if we wanted to. Okay. So, since you are one of the like 2 people that consistently come, I will be doing it at 7. Just so it's a little less late in the night. Okay. Thank you for joining me. That was really cool that we got to end it like that. And I'm so excited to see you for Thursday for these extras in the epilogue. Until then, goodbye!